The next principle of animation is that of arcs. If you start to compare natural versus man-made objects, one of the common trends you'll notice is that natural objects tend to have a lot of curves and man-made objects tend to have straight lines. This means if we want our animations to look more natural, we need to find a natural curve and path to their movements. And this is true for any kind of object that you have. Finding and using these arcs is key to natural movement. This means that if your animation wants to have a greater sense of realism, the objects in it need to follow or move in an arched trajectory. Now, arcs are something that are not intuitive. You really have to observe how things move, and we very often take this for granted. For instance, we're used to seeing a ball jump in an arc trajectory from one side to the other. However, if we were to break this down using the keyframe moments, the starting point, the ending point, and even the crest in the middle, if all this was the information that we had, we very may well make the mistake of doing an arc trajectory that looked like this. And of course, this is wrong. This means we need to pay close attention to exactly how objects move so that they do move in a fluid, arced movement. Another way of looking at it is imagine a butterfly. If it was flying in straight lines, it wouldn't be very natural. As a matter of fact, this is the most unnatural way a butterfly would move. Instead, we're used to seeing a butterfly follow these natural curves. This is the kind of thing that we need to look for in real life that we can start to apply to our own animation work. Now, arcs are also very important in figure animation. All the joints within a figure's body can act as a central point of rotation for any kind of arced movement. This means something as simple as waving your arm can have multiple arcs to break down. The shoulder is a point of rotation for the elbow, which leads to the wrist and even the fingers. All of these will need to move in an arc trajectory if you want to have a believable hand wave. Now, if you want to create a much more realistic and dynamic walking character, you can start to combine multiple arcing movements. In this case, this character is not just walking from side to side, but he's also moving up and down. Each of these movements has their own different arced movement, and when you combine both of these within their cycle, the extremities would mark back and forth and look something like this. In this case, it's not just simply moving from side to side, it's moving in 3 dimensions, giving you an almost lasso-like kind of movement. Now, arcs also play an important bit in how a character can move throughout a scene. In this next bit, Aladdin is going to be evading one of the guards and he's going to be moving from side to side in an arced fashion. Pay close attention because it's going to go quick, but count up how many times he moves in an arced manner across the screen. Did you see it? It was very quick. Let's slow it down. First, after he bumps into him, here's one arc, evading to the right, and then he's going to jump over him in an arc that way. We even get the monkey moving in an arced fashion. He pulls out his belt in an arc. One more arc to the right. And watch the monkey jump on his shoulder in an arcing fashion as well as he exits the scene. Arcs are also very important in determining the nature of different kinds of action. For instance, if you've got an object that's moving in a straight path, that usually indicates that it's moving very quickly or over a short amount of time, and it's got a very focused kind of movement. However, if you wanted to slow the object down and show that it's moving over a longer distance, then you would have that object following an arced path. Another way of indicating action is by the use of speed or action lines. This has historically been used by comic artists whenever a character is moving so fast that parts of their body are blurring by, and they would indicate this blur by drawing the lines in the direction that the character is moving. These speed lines can also be used in your traditional animation. As long as the lines follow the action or the direction of action that the character is moving, then your eye will perceive it as a natural, quick, and very fast movement. This means if you've got a character or part of a character that's moving in an arced fashion, you can really emphasize the speed and power of that movement by adding a blurred arc behind its movement. Now, video games have been doing this for a long time. In order to emphasize the speed and power in which the character is moving, within that game's sprite, they'll automatically add some motion blur to whatever part of the body is moving. When you do this and you play this within the video game, it takes fewer frames to animate, but it still gives you the powerful effect of landing a hard punch or a kick on your opponent. It's also a common TV trope whenever you have sword fighting to emphasize the movement of the swords by adding motion blur to their movements. Notice how in this one, all of the blurring that happens between each of the swords as they're fighting. This adds to both the aesthetic of the overall animation, but also helps guide your eye in exactly what they're doing, regardless how quick it's happening. Finally, some additional notes on using arcs within your animation. A good animator pays close attention to the arcing movements of both his figures and all of the objects. They do this by keeping track of the paths that they move, either on a separate layer in the software or on a separate sheet of paper. Tracking these arced movements also helps translate the position of exactly where their figure should be in between all of the keyframes, and it helps other animators know not to move in a straight line, but to move along an arced path. As you plan out a scene, try to add arced movements to your characters and to their objects, if it's called for. Adding this arced movement is going to add a lot of visual interest and natural movement to your overall animation. And you can do this by combining it with squash and stretch to help exaggerate that arced movement. Alright, let's do a demo to show you how you can easily add arced movement within the software.